Welcome to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast with Darren Mitchell. If you're a sales leader looking to take your leadership to a whole new level, then this is the podcast for you. We'll be exploring tips, techniques, and strategies to help you take your leadership to the exceptional level and allow you to enjoy more money, more meaning, and better sales results. Welcome to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast. Darren Mitchell here in what is now quite a dark night here in the Macedon Ranges in Australia, and I have the absolute privilege today of talking to Mr. Will Barron, who is in England, and we're at opposite ends of the day, my friend. So welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate having me on, Darren. Yeah, I've just done my first group coaching call of the day. And so yeah, I literally just put a shirt on just for this conversation. So I was in slightly more scruffy 15 minutes ago before I was running around after the group coaching call getting changed. So yeah, absolute opposite ends of the time spectrum.
It is. You must be like me, because I often only put a business shirt on like this when I'm talking to important people and doing podcasts. Otherwise, it's just whatever flows, whatever goes, and I won't even begin to tell you what I'm wearing beneath.
I was just about to make that joke as well. You took the words out of my mouth. I was teeing me up to say that I'm not wearing any trousers here. And maybe I am, maybe I'm not.
That's right. But for those of you who are going to be looking at this down the track on YouTube, I'm not going to stand up. Just put it that way.
Yeah.
So it's great. It's great to have you on the podcast. You're the managing director and founder of salesman.com. I must say that is amazing how you managed to get that domain name first and foremost. How good is that?
There's a story behind that if you want to go into it. It's
enough
to do with sales or leadership, but we can touch on it if you like.
Sure.
Cool. So I mean, get into the origin story if you like as well later on. But the business was founded on the domain upgraded salesperson.com, which is obviously the worst domain of all time. Then it moved over to salesman.red, and these new colored domains became available. Snapped that one up. I was like, that's kind of cool. And that's where the red branding comes from. Okay. Then I got salesman.org. It was a couple of grand. And then I had a few people, rightly so, say, hey, I went on your website. I was expecting more of like a non-profit or some kind of organization down that route with the .org domain. So then I started to hunt down salesman.com, and it was a family-owned business over in they're based in Dubai, and the business is registered in Dubai. They've got loads of domains. They're absolutely killing it. The very rich family got in the domain business relatively early and have done a good job buying, trading, upselling, building value by domains. And every time I emailed the brokers, because there are multiple brokers over the years, the price would go up. And I think they would, I'm being conscious of my language here, I think they were just taking the mick out of the offers that they were getting. Because, this is maybe 5 years ago, I started to hunt it down. I got it about 12 months ago, secured it then. And every time I'd make them an offer, which was a reasonable offer, because I owned salesman.red, salesman.org, salesman.xyz, and so no one else was going to buy it because it was going to be too conflicting with our audience. And humbly, we've got a reasonable size audience for a domain like that. And so I knew they were going to sell it to me at some point. They knew that they were going to sell it to me at some point. The price kept going up. They were just taking the mick. And then I had a Google alert set out for the company name. And the company that was holding the domain were having a few issues. And it's, without going into it too much, because I don't want to get sued for libel, and this is on the public record, it's a bunch of magazines and newspapers, online magazines and newspapers have talked about it. It's a brother and sister, and they were suing each other. One of them was going off the rails. The other one was trying to run a legitimate business. And basically, they were selling off domains in a fire sale to pay for all the lawsuits and the legal. So I sent them an offer. It got accepted within hours. And then that's where the domain came from. So it was expensive, but I got it for a steal on the back of their kind of business issues, which was a bit of a waiting game from my perspective. But yeah, I was dead happy getting it in the end. Because I think you're rightly or wrongly, I think that .com single word has a layer of prestige and value to it. It shouldn't. It's just a series of letters on a screen. It doesn't really mean anything.
Well, it is.
But it seems to have that kind of value.
Yeah, because when I saw it, I'm thinking that is phenomenal. Like you must have had this for decades, but it's not. I mean, that's a really, really interesting story,
Mhm.
fascinating story. So, Will, where did it all start for you? For you, so I know you've been in sales a long time, and you sort of talk about being a half decent salesperson, and then over time turned into an elite, highly respected seller. And I'm from the perspective I love sales, and I think sales is the ultimate form of service. But there's a certain method of going about selling that needs to be ethical, and I'd love to delve into that. But where did it all start for you? What was it about sales, or did you like many other people fall into it?
So there's the origin story of salesman.com, and then there's the absolute origin story of me getting into sales. And that was me doing a degree in chemistry and being terrible at chemistry and barely scraping by. And from there going, okay, I need to make some money, get a job. And a logical step for me was I didn't want to be in a lab. And I had entrepreneurial aspirations at that point. I run a tiny kind of business at university and it paid for my rent and that kind of thing. So I knew that I had that kind of bug to create things and build something and be somewhat creative in building value for other people and then obviously charging them for it. So I knew that that was the scratch to be itched later on. Um, and I got advice that hey, maybe sales would be a useful skill set to go into any future entrepreneurial endeavors with. So I
Hmm.
looked for sales jobs, and I got a job selling pharmaceutical catalyst, selling catalyst into the pharmaceutical industry here in the UK. So it's selling hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of platinum and palladium and all these precious metals to all of the mega pharmaceutical companies that we all know kind of by
Yeah,
brands. And I lasted 2 months and then got sacked. It was not a,
too much.
it was not a good fit for me. I got to the end of probation and they're like, okay, goodbye. A key kind of moment along that journey was I sent an invoice and missed a zero off, moved the decimal
Oh,
place in the wrong direction. And they honored it and they got 50 grand's worth of platinum or 50 grams of palladium for $5,000. So yeah, so that was a bit of a fumble, and it was an office-based role, and there's a bunch of other shenanigans on the pathway there. Of it was supposed to be a graduate role, and the person who was going to be moving on, so that position freed up, didn't get moved on, and all kinds of shenanigans. So it was never meant to be. But from there, that gave me the taste of I actually enjoy engaging with people, explaining what we did, explaining the value, and then I really enjoyed the feedback loop of then getting a "you're an idiot" and the phone slammed in my face, or this is interesting, let's discuss this further. And obviously, I'm being slightly hyperbolic. No one from Pfizer's procurement team was slamming the phone down in my face, but the
they
premise of
don't
the
answer
quick
the phone in
feedback
the
loop.
first place.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, it's just emails. In fact, even then it was barely even emails. They had this, they might even have it now, this archaic system of communication between all the different brands. The company I work for is called Johnson Matthey. It's one of the biggest companies you've never heard of. They make like two-thirds of all catalytic converters for
Wow.
for cars and other vehicles. So they're absolute mega organizations. They had their own essentially like communication platform with all these
Yeah.
organizations because the price of all these commodity of these precious metals were changing all the time. So everyone was wanting to kind of get the press prices on things. But from there, got into medical device sales. And then that's where the salesman.com origin comes in of I was decent. So medical devices is a relatively elite space. So I was decent, kind of middle performer within a group of high performers. And I came home one day, and this sounds like the beginning to a webinar or some kind of sales pitch, but very literally, I came home one day. I was like, right, I want to improve my sales skill set. And I vividly remember it. Typed into Google how to get better at sales, and it
Yeah.
was a bunch of, and I'm painting a broad brush here somewhat. It was a bunch of American men in ill-fitting suits and women with shoulder pads in their jackets telling me to do things that if I said any of that to a surgeon here in the UK, I won't repeat the language that they'd throw at me, but then you'd never be allowed back in that account. You'd never be able to get in there. If they even sense that you're trying to manipulate them, and all this would all my conversations with surgeons would be done in the operating room typically. So they've got their hands inside a patient. If you're trying to manipulate
Yeah.
them to change their tooling, their systems, their processes to something that ultimately may not be of benefit to patient outcomes on the basis of getting a deal done, you can imagine what instruments would be hurled across the room, like towards your face, right? Then it depends how quick-footed you can be in a pair of Crocs and a pair of scrubs as to whether you get stabbed
That's
by a scalpel or
right.
not. So none of the advice was appropriate. So then I started interviewing people, and that became the genesis of the podcast. Then I started interviewing sales experts. Very quickly found there was less sales experts out there that were sharing advice and training and ways to improve my skill set that would work. So I interviewed Formula One drivers, Olympic athletes, elite military snipers, all kinds, UFC fighters, all kinds of crazy high performers, to try and ascertain if there's a link between just general high performer mentalities and mindsets with that of the sales process, and of which there are many. So that then became the
Yeah.
podcast. People asked for training. Training came, and the rest is history at this point.
And Bob's your uncle. Here you are.
Yeah. Somehow I'm
Salesman.com.
now sharing a morning or an evening with yourself, Darren, and we'll keep
That's
that.
right.
This was
Well,
nearly 10 years ago, which is crazy. It doesn't seem like 10 years ago since I got started with all this. Yeah, we had 9.5 years right now since the company was founded.
that's phenomenal. And what's really fascinating about that is, you're typing in how to be a better salesperson, and all the stuff was coming up with probably the, what is it, shoulder pads. That would be late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
Probably the fire and brimstone, just, close, 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 close. But then talking to high performers in different industries, because when you think about it, it's the strategies and the principles that sit behind high performance that can very easily translate into selling and being exceptional at selling. But a lot of people don't necessarily think about that. They think there has to be a process, or it has to be the methodology, or it has to be the product. And I'm sure you'll tell us that it's not necessarily the case. You've got to have a good product. You've got to have something that's of value, but it's not necessarily all the scripts or all the things you say
Yeah.
that determines your outcome.
And it's massively cliche, but it is important. If you're in a race and you're driving I always use this example, then I have to explain it. Do you know what a Robin Reliant is?
Oh, what?
A Robin Reliant.
Robin Reliant.
It's a
No,
car.
is that a UK? Is that a UK
It must be. I did a podcast the other
euphemism?
day. Did it? Oh, not a euphemism. I did a podcast with a US podcaster the other day, and they'd never heard of it.
Okay.
I thought
Okay.
you and I being from similar descendants, we might have crossed paths with this. It's a three-wheeler UK car, but it must be UK based.
Oh, like the one in Mr. Bean.
Yes, yes, exactly, Mr. Bean's car, right? So if you're driving one of those, and your product isn't very effective, someone who is less skilled than you at driving a Ferrari is going to win the race, right? So
Yeah.
that's the analogy I would use for product. You absolutely want to be selling the industry standard or the best or most exciting product in a space. You want to tie that in with your commissions and your bonus and the structure and everything else that comes alongside it. Or if you're managing a team, you want to be managing a team of high performance individuals in a high performance space with something that is either industry standard or has a lot of innovation going on behind the scenes. And you're more likely to win with the same skill set being in that situation. So you absolutely want to engineer that. And when I worked in medical devices, I worked for one organization that owned 49% of the market. I then moved to the other organization that owned 49% of the market. And it would have been crazy to have moved to the one or two other players that had 1%. Because you just build,
Yeah.
you're creating you're building you're trying to fight a battle without the kind of the arms necessary to get the battle won in that instance. As I throw terrible analogy metaphor after metaphor. So that's important, and I think that was underlooked when we're doing sales training and we're doing coaching and that side of things as well. If you're telling a terrible product, you're then getting close to the immoral and unethical to kind of get deals over the line, because probably the buyer should go with the superior product and you're trying to influence them not to do that. So that's kind of that's a tale in its own right, I guess. But yeah, the mindset side, I think that the best kind of example I've got from that is I interviewed an astronaut, and I said to him, I was asking him, well, I have people that are nervous to cold call. And I work with a lot of sales leadership who have not cold called in 10 years, and they're nervous to do a cold call in front of their team because they don't look like an idiot. So it's not just frontline salespeople who are nervous of picking up a phone and having someone say no, thank you, which is 99%
Yeah.
of the time, right? Which is, who cares? It's not a problem.
Mm.
And he looked at me like I was an idiot. At first off, he was confused why I was on a sales podcast in the first place, right? So I was having to influence and sell him as to why he should have been there throughout the entire show. But I said to him, you are sat on top of a tube full of explosive, and you're going to get exploded away from the planet that you've evolved to be on. We obviously humans can't survive in space. We've got all kinds of crazy technology and material science and the mathematicians working behind the scenes to calculate all these things. And I was like, do you get nervous of that? And he's like, no, he's not
Mm.
nervous at all. And that's because he believes in the skill set and support of his team. And most importantly for salespeople, he has all the fundamentals in place.
Yeah.
So he's not reliant on thinking on his feet. He
Mm.
he was picked for that role because he has certain traits and attributes personality wise. He has done so much training that it's become second nature to him. And that
Mm.
was a really aha moment for me when I was doing the podcast and then relating that back to the people that I consult and help and train. In that, if you've got all the fundamentals right, you shouldn't be nervous about picking up the phone, or you
Mm.
shouldn't be nervous if, we talk about the traits of high performers in a second, if you like, the specific ones that we've
Yeah.
uncovered with our assessment. But if you have most of these traits, you naturally, organically are going to lean into like a difficult customer conversation or
Yeah.
whatever it may be. So it's doing the groundwork first, as
Mm.
opposed to being excited about some new AI tool or this
Yeah.
software or this methodology or the technique. Because I think salespeople, and that, everyone falls into it a little bit. I'm into photography. I fall into it all the time with photography, that the grass is always greener if you use this lens rather than this one, or this is going to
That's
improve that. And
right.
it's not, it's skill set. I do landscape photography. You got to be in the right place at the right time, and
Yeah.
you've got to have equipment capable enough of capturing that image.
Mm.
For salespeople, it's the right message to the right person at the right time, and if you've got those right, the rest of it will typically fall into place.
And as well as that, you've also got to understand who your ideal customer is as well. Because if you can't identify who that ideal customer is, you might have the best products, but they don't need it. And so why are you having the conversation? So
Yep.
don't force it. It's fascinating as you're talking. I'm thinking of all the shiny thing syndrome moments that I've had in my career where whether it be a brand new sales campaign, or it's the brand new introduction of the CRM system, or there's this brand new sales methodology that's supposed to be the elixir that changes the direction of the entire business. And when you look at those introductions of those things, very rarely does it make any material difference. You might have a short uptick in terms of performance, but eventually it goes back to status quo. And for the most part, it's because they haven't looked and become elite at the fundamentals. And that's why I really resonated with the book, Selling Made Simple, because you can break it down into the fundamentals. So when you were moving from the half decent salesperson into the elite and then interviewing all these people, and we'll talk about some of the attributes and traits of high performing salespeople, were there certain things for you that through that, I guess, evolution enabled you to do a step jump and really, because part of it, as you've already talked about, is aligning yourself with a company that has a reasonable product offering, because otherwise you're pushing the proverbial uphill. But were there certain things that you learnt that ended up being the difference for you?
So a couple of big ones was, as you mentioned, understanding your buyer, your ideal customer persona, understanding their buyer's journey, asking
Mm.
them what they think the next step might be. If they don't, with an open-ended question, if they don't know, then it's our job to help, sherpa them towards the next step, because we've done that step many times. They may have not done it in the past, so we use closed-ended questions to follow up. And then it's being able to communicate our value proposition in one sentence. So and this is it. I'm not trying to trick people when I ask this question, but when I work with new salespeople or come in to do training with a team, I'll find whoever's the top performer and ask them, "Hey, how do you describe your product or service in one sentence?" And nobody
Mm.
can do it ever.
Yeah.
No one has ever done it. Not even not even me being pernickety, and it's been, they've done it in one sentence, but it's been terrible. No one can do it in one sentence. And if you can't do that, you don't really understand what your buyers want, your feature, the benefit, and then the desire of the buyer. You just don't know what it is if you can't articulate your
Mm.
value proposition in one sentence. So me with salesman.com getting really clear that we help salespeople or sales teams find and close my deals next 30 days or their money back. That then unlocked all the prospecting. It unlocked all the communication with a procurement team, trying to justify the pricing when the sales team are on board. It allows you to get sign off from executives in a quick and seamless and simple way, just from that one sentence of really understanding what people want, adding a time frame to it, reducing risk with a money back guarantee, and that was a big breakthrough for me.
Mm-hmm.
But from the mindset side of things, there was two things. One was assertiveness, and this was a breakthrough for me live on a podcast when I interviewed someone about becoming more assertive. His name's Robert Glover. And the other thing was setting and keeping habits, because I am a less so now. And it's interesting as I kind of ponder on that of how your identity shifts. So 10 years ago, I would have said that I'm a massive procrastinator. All the way through university and school, my report card would always be has potential, but doesn't apply himself, right? I'd be getting B's and C's when I could get an A if I just did the work. And that always held me back. And so dealing with procrastination by setting and keeping strong habits, that was like a real breakthrough for me as well. So I just threw about 15 things at you there, Darren. So I'm happy to dive into any of them, mate. But the value proposition, ICP, understanding and setting stronger habits, and becoming more assertive as well. They for me were the key things that took me from pretty decent to, I would like to think, kind of relatively elite at this point.
So can I pick on one of those? And that's assertiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And often, depending on, and when I talk to sales teams, I often like to ask the direct question, who here likes to be sold to? Right? And very rarely do people put their hand up, right? But when you ask the question, who likes to buy, just about everybody puts their hand up. So from my perspective, assertiveness and aggressiveness is a very fine line. And often it becomes in the eyes of the beholder in terms of which one's which. So when you think about assertiveness, what was it that you had to embrace that was just stopping short of the aggressiveness that a lot of people have in terms of the typical salesperson, the snake, or you're just trying to close at every opportunity? Because at the end of the day, if we've got a solution to a problem that a customer has, we'd be doing them a disservice if we didn't share that solution, right? So was there anything specific within assertiveness that was like the elixir for you, or the difference that made all the difference?
Two things. One, speaking with Robert Glover, covert contracts. Come to that in a second. But I add a third element to the range that you're describing there of passiveness, assertiveness, aggressiveness. So you can understand where you are on that scale by the exchange of value that you're getting and giving when you engage with prospects. If you are passive, you're give, maybe take, which seems like a useful mindset to have as a salesperson, to give lots and take a little. But then nobody respects you. They don't see you as a partner. They don't see you as an expert or a consultant. They see you as a pesky salesperson. That is what the desperate salesperson does. So you want to avoid that. When you get to the middle, which I consider assertive, at that point, you're exchanging fair amounts of value. So it might be give, take, give, take, give, take. But you want to be doing that throughout the sales process. And we can dive into that practically how that works in a second, if you like. But then when you've got aggressive, it's just, I need this. There's a deadline here. We need you to sign up at this point. It's false scarcity. It's all these terrible tactics that 80s, 90s, and early 2000s sales traders would be telling people to do to build fake urgency and get deals over the line. That doesn't work in the world that we live in now, because if you email me and you're behaving like that, I just delete your email. If you call me, I just get the number and just block the number. I do not, as a buyer, need to engage with anyone who is being completely selfish in and especially a B2B, a B2B transaction, right? So that's the scale. And I find that adding that passiveness to it, we don't want to be passive either. We want to be in the middle where there's a fair exchange of value being kind of taken, given, and delivered.
And that means we've got to set, I guess, the ground rules, but also know what our best case scenario, almost like negotiating best case walkaway position is, and identify and clearly be able to articulate what is the value that I believe that I'm going to provide you as the customer, but also ask those questions to try and get from them what is their perception of what value looks like for them, so we can hopefully come up to some sort of a value transfer.
Yeah, it's asking questions like, what do you think is the next step forward? If they don't
Yeah.
know, having worked with people like yourself, the next step forward might be this. Does that make sense? So
Mm.
you're giving the person that you engage with ample opportunity to say, no, I don't like this. But you're not going, okay, I'll drop you an email. Let me know when you want to re-engage, which is
Yeah.
absolutely passive. The best
Yeah.
example for this is with an invoice or proposal. Passive would be, I'll send this over today. Let me know if you want to get started. As, drop me a message if you want to get started. Passive.
Yeah.
Aggressive would be, before I send this email, are you going to get signed up today? Or before I send this invoice, are you going to get signed up today? And if everything's going smoothly, maybe you can. That might not be a terrible question. But 9 times out of 10 in a complex B2B deal, the person's going to go, well, I don't know. I'll have a think about it, and you're going to get
Yeah.
pushback from it. Assertive would be, if I send you this today, would it make sense to jump on a call tomorrow morning? We can really quickly run through it, and I can answer any questions you have. So I'm going to do
Yeah.
all the work, the paperwork, and the proposal side of things. I might have to get signed off internally or our end, and yada yada yada. Would it make sense to jump a quick call, and you could give me feedback on it? That would be an
Mm.
assertive way to deliver that proposal or invoice. That's what I encourage every salesperson to do at every step of the buyer's journey, as you guide them through it if they need the guiding, or you allow them to guide you through it if they've got a procurement or a purchase process in place.
And when you talk about asking them questions in terms of what is the likely next step, or what is the next best step, for a lot of, and I know this from experience, a lot of salespeople say, I can't give the customer that power. What if they say no? I've got to go back to my sales manager or sales director now and explain to them why the forecast I said is going to hit won't hit. I can't do that. I've got to maintain control. But what I'm hearing and what I've experienced is when you give value, when you understand the buyer's journey and you know that you've got a solution that will fit or solve the problem that the customer has, when you give them the opportunity, because we already know that people like to do the buying. And if you give them that opportunity, they're more than likely going to take it. Would you agree with
No,
that?
yeah, in principle, I'd agree with that. But also, I'm here to help salespeople and sales leaders make a bunch of money, retire early, buy the Porsche, whatever it is. So this isn't a moral or ethical question. I'm just pre-framing this as, yes, in an ideal world, what you just described is absolutely what we'd all do. But practically, how I implement that is what I call micro closing, which is, does it make sense to do this? If they say no, I don't just go, crap, I'm going to have an awkward conversation with my boss now. I'll then ask the follow-up question, what does it make sense to do? And if
Yeah.
they say, I don't know, then I might coach them on, well, working with people like yourself, the next step might be this. Would it make sense
Mm,
to do that? No.
mm,
Okay, well, now you know what the next step is for most people. Where have we gone wrong in this? Do we need to take
yeah.
a few steps back? Do you understand what we deliver?
Yeah.
So it's a constant just feedback loop of asking them,
Mm,
does this make sense? Does it make sense? Does it make sense? Does it make sense? And eventually something will make sense. And it might
yeah.
be to get in contact with them in 3 months because it turns out that the CFO is just about to change jobs. He's the person or she's the person that signs all this off. Follow up with us then. And it might be a legitimate objection that this
Mm,
cannot move forward, as opposed to them just trying to get rid of you off a cold call with one of the many standard objections that we all face. Um,
yeah.
and that only comes from trying to work with the buyer, not from a place of trying to manipulate them, but trying to
Mm,
understand, does this the sliver of value that we offer to that entire organization, especially when you're the enterprise or medium businesses where there's so much going on, so many competing priorities and
mm,
and different variables. All we're trying to do is, does this make sense as a premise that we can solve this problem or add this value? Okay,
yeah.
does it make sense to progress this deal forward? And for some deals, it won't make sense. And for the ones
Mm,
that it does, you should be assertive about communicating, allowing them to share their next steps with you or helping them find those next steps. Because
yeah.
fundamentally, the salesperson has done this process 50 times. The buyer might have never done it before in their career. So that's the value that you can offer. If you know nothing about the product, you can always bring in a product specialist. If you know
Yeah.
very little about the industry, you can lean on the buyer of their expertise. Do you think this is a good fit for you?
Yeah.
But you absolutely, if you've been in the role for more than a few months, you've got a couple of deals under your belt, you probably have more understanding of getting this product service in place and realizing the value than what they have. Because if they knew how to do all this, they didn't have to speak to you in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the other interesting thing, particularly in 2024, is how many customers are already doing their research before they engage with you. And a lot of cases have already made up their mind as to who they're going to liaise with or align with. So
Yeah.
they're going to be expecting you to come in and be educated, know the process, and to some degree lead them through that process as well.
Yeah, it's shocking to me, Darren, how, and this is like the past 3 or 4 years, during and post COVID, I have so many people coming to me now going, okay, I know you don't do on-site 1 day sales training. I know you do this, this, and this. Can you implement this, this, and this within these criteria? Whereas 5, 10 years ago, it was, can you send me a proposal for what you can offer? I like the podcast. So
Yeah,
even my own buyers are way more educated just because they're consuming more content before they do that initial kind of
yeah,
inbound to me kind of outreach as to what I offer service wise.
yeah. Love it, love it. So I'd love to talk about some of the traits based on your research of high performers. Just before I do that, though, there is a question I wanted to ask you around helping salespeople become better, but making selling more simple for them.
Mhm.
Because at the end of the day, when you look at and when you ask the question, why do most salespeople get into sales and why are they in sales? It's to make a bucket load of money, right? They're very in many cases that well, yeah, I don't hear many salespeople say because I want to make the world a better place, right? It's a selfish
I,
element to it, right?
I think most people fall into it because they need to make some money to pay rent. And then they hear
Yeah,
people like you and I and other people on their team going, well, the opportunities are almost endless. And
yeah,
then they pivot to let's make some money.
yeah,
But I think from I don't know, you can give me your thoughts, but I think most, and I did it, most salespeople fall into the role. As you said, no one is at 14 going, can't wait to sell complex B2B software to the the broadcast production industry. Like
that's
unless your
right.
mother or father or your favorite uncle or something's a salesperson and they make a boatload of money, it's probably unlikely that that's the case, right?
So this might lead into some of the traits, but is there anything that stands out for you based on your research, but also the work you've been doing over the last 9.5, 10 years on becoming the person? Because I often talk to sales leaders who have a to-do list that's longer than their arm. But when I mention to them, well, how long is your to-be list? And they look at me like I'm an absolute alien. And I say, well, if you actually focused on who you need to be today for your team, and therefore work with your team on how they can be in front of their customer, you might actually start getting some different results. So are there any specific traits on how to become better that leads us to becoming more successful as a salesperson, as a lead in to some of the other traits that we'll talk about?
Yeah, so absolutely. So, and I love the way you frame that up. That was awesome because it's very similar to how I frame up all of our content. Of the Sell Made Simple book is the process, the things you need to do each day to have success. The Sales Code book, which is my second book, is becoming the person who's capable of implementing the process. So if
Right.
you're unassertive, it doesn't matter how good your process is, you're not going to ask the questions that you need to ask to progress a deal along the buyer's journey. So I love that. I really appreciate that because it's something absolutely underappreciated and under discussed in our industry. Of you've got to become the person who is capable of achieving what you want to achieve. So with that said, we've had this assessment running now. I think it's been running for 4 years. I keep saying that 20,000 people have been through it, but 20,000 people have been through it 2 years ago. So it might be 30, 40,000 people at this point. And we started off, and when I say we, I mean me. I'm the only
Yeah.
employee within sales.com. Got a bunch of awesome freelancers and a team around me, but I don't want to make it sound more grandiose than what it is. It's me sat here at a computer, right? When I run through this. We started with 150 different traits. And what we did was look at, we put together statistically significant numbers and structure of questions to get to clearly identify whether the high performers based on quota attainment, but also um, overall take home deal like bonus commission and salary size, because we want to prioritize people who are earning more than $500,000. I consider that high performing in the space.
Yeah.
But also obviously if you're hitting quota every year, then it's a company problem that you're not being pushed for high quota attainment. So we include that as well. we use that to then tie into the traits that those individuals had. We started off with 150. Over the years, I've added and tested more to experiment, and we broke it down into 18. And one of those 18 traits of high performance, we can run for as many as you like. One of them is simplification. It's
Mm.
understanding that if there are currently 12 steps in a process, if you can remove 6 of them and your results go down by 2%, but you now got 50% more time, you can then do double the work within that time period, or you can reduce the stress. The role becomes more sustainable. And for a sales leader, you've got a team that is not going to churn. You've got a team that is going to have better kind of satisfaction in the role, and they're not going to be pestering you for this tool, that thing, this, if they're all making good money and not working too crazy hours. There's the variables there we can now play with of more work,
Mm.
same amount of time, or less work with the same results. So simplification is one of the key traits that we identified as the 18 traits of high performing salespeople. And it's we can get into the nuances and the ins and outs of it all, but basically it is look at the process, document it, remove the things that aren't working.
Yeah.
And no, most organizations haven't documented their sales process in the past 15 years, especially large
Mm.
organizations. And in that time, they've had 5 trainers come in with 15 different methodologies, and they've changed tools 18 times. And they're using a cadence and a series of structured emails that are written by a BDR who was a graduate who has a degree in, I don't know, some agriculture, who has zero understanding and acumen of the industry, and it's just a mess. So when I
Mm.
work with organizations coming into training, one of the first things to do is just like, right, what are people doing? What's the high performers doing? How do we take the few things that they're doing well and give that to the rest of the team? And immediately we see kind of 10, 20% bumps in improvement in performance by me just interviewing a few people and putting together a playbook. And I say
Mm.
that as if it's this big fancy thing. It's a Google Doc with do these 5 things in it. And immediately, it gets shared around. Allow people to edit it so people can have their own kind of thoughts, and you build then that culture of this customer
Mm.
story worked really well with this objection, and allow the team to kind of build it and improve upon it over time. But
Yeah.
10, 20% improvement in revenue on the back of just a few interviews. And it's not, you don't have to bring me and yourself in to do it. You can do some of this yourself as a sales leader.
Mm.
Identify what's working with the high performers, pull everything else, and just give those few nuggets to the people who you want to go from a C to a B plus. And that's
Yeah.
the biggest needle mover for most organizations.
And just on that point, the simplification, I just wonder how many people within organizations are reluctant to simplify because there are different parts of the organization that need forecasting, or they need reports, or they need this, or they need that. And they say, no, no, we can't exclude that. We have to get that. And therefore, by default, how much pressure gets placed on the salesperson to have to make sure that things like the CRM system is updated, or they've got to propose these type of people for an upcoming industry event. We've got to do this account plan. We've got to do this industry brief or this meeting brief, etc., etc. What you're saying is just look at the whole thing, what's working really well. Think about the things that can be simplified and focus on that.
I used to get in trouble all the time at my last sales role for just not doing my monthly reporting of mileage. It's a field sales role. Just didn't do it. Didn't care. In hindsight, it's important because it's related to like that, and there's a bunch of now running a business. I know the importance of it, right? But so in hindsight, I probably should have made more effort with it. But my attitude was, and this is absolutely what a sales leader should be doing: is my sales leader will cover my ass and get this, not do the work for me, but will kind of get everyone to just sod off for a few weeks so I could get focused and do it on the weekend or wherever
Yeah.
it was that I was going to do it, because it was just a terrible waste of my time. To
Mm.
do that during selling hours like the admin team wanted me to do was just a complete waste of my time, everyone's time, and it was just dumb. If you're in
Yeah.
a revenue generating role, your goal should be meetings in the diary. And I wish it was more complicated than this, because I charge 3 times more for the training and consulting, right? But meetings in the diary is a cadence that regularly, reliably, step by step books meetings. That doesn't matter whether you do it or someone else does it. It can be scaled. It can be repeated. That is step one.
Yeah.
If you're not got meetings, you can't do anything else, right? Then
Yeah.
it's how do I communicate the value so that the person, even before we even get to pricing, is like, yeah, this sounds like a great fit. Tell me
Mm.
more. We want that to tell me more about this. How do we get started? We need a structure for the meeting and a structure, ask questions and build a conversation that leads to that point. And then we
Mm.
need to understand the buyer's internal purchasing journey. And if you're selling to founders of small businesses, then great. You speak to the founder. Does it make sense? Yeah, send you an invoice. Let's get
Yeah.
going. It's a more complicated process. A procurement team needs more intimate knowledge of how the procurement process works. That is it. To have someone
Mm.
doing mileage reporting and they're getting pestered to do it at Tuesday at 2 p.m. when you've just come out of a really important meeting and you probably need to make notes or you need to do some follow up is
Yeah.
crazy. So it's not
Yeah.
just sales activity that salespeople are hounded with and inundated with. It's all kinds of stuff that
Yeah.
absolutely should just be, if not killed, should be prioritized to one day a month we do this and we all
Yeah.
just sit around as a team and get it done. But going back to the question on reporting, what's the point in the reporting if it's all bullshit data that's inputted because you're trying to hit a KPI and a metric in the first place? It's dumb. It's stupid. It is crazy. And the executive, you speak to a CRO or a CEO or someone at that level within a medium to large organization, they're going, what am I supposed to do with this? They don't even
Yeah.
realize that it's nonsensical unless they were a salesperson. They've been through that process. They
Yeah.
they don't even understand that they're going to the board. They're, heaven forbid, a public company. They're going to shareholders and they're just regurgitating this nonsense because Will Barron is in the field and isn't, doesn't want to get told off by a sales manager by inputting the wrong data. So, there is, one of the traits of high performers is optimism.
Yeah.
And so that's something that all salespeople need, sales leaders need as well. You can absolutely learn and develop all these traits as well. There's nothing here that can't be self-engineered
Yeah.
if you want to take personal accountability for your success. But there's optimism, and then there's just, lying until next quarter when you might get caught up on it or you might not. So, the whole system falls apart if roles and expectations are not aligned with the role and the data activities aren't aligned with the expectations from the role. Salespeople
Mm.
should be driving revenue, and unless you're doing account management and there is your retention and other things as well, which some people are doing, which is fine.
Mm.
Unless you're doing that specifically, you should absolutely just only be booking meetings, only progressing deals forward. That is it,
Yeah.
nothing else.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a bit
Yeah.
of a rant for the day.
When you talk about optimism, I know a lot of people say, well, hope's not a strategy, but guarantee you still have to have hope. And to have hope, you've got to be optimistic.
You've got to
So
be realistic, right? You've got to
yeah.
understand that for every 5 meetings that you have, one of them statistically is going to come in. So then when
Yeah.
you're on meeting number 7 and nothing's coming in, you're like, okay, well, I understand the statistics. So I'm going to next week, I'm going to have a bumper week and I'm going to make a bunch of
Yeah.
money.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's not being delusional, but by any means. It's not
Yeah.
focusing on your chakra or buying some magic crystal or any hippie nonsense, right? It's still bum in the seat doing the work, but it's
Yeah.
knowing that if you're in the right role, the right product, you've got product market fit, people want the service, and you're not a complete numpty. People know if
Mm.
they're a numpty or not, and that's something they can work
Yeah.
on. But if you're reasonable and you've got a reasonable skill set, then it's just activity and it's
Yeah.
consistency that get most salespeople to kind of the elite levels.
Is that one of the I was going to say, is that one of the key 18 traits, consistency?
Consistency kind of ties in with goal setting, habits, simplification, and a bunch of others. It could absolutely be its own
Yeah.
thing, but essentially habit setting, especially when you're prospecting more than anything else.
Yeah.
Habits around prospecting leads to then the consistency down the rest of the
Mm.
funnel. Nobody
Yeah.
doesn't show up for an important sales meeting, right?
Yeah.
People don't show up to do some cold email or to they try and get out of doing industry events and that side of things at the top of the funnel.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was going to ask you, because I'm conscious of time, of the 150 traits that you started with, you Crystal got them down to 18. Were there any that you looked at and thought, well, that's surprising, that you kind of
One
didn't expect?
one that made the cut, and this kind of ties into assertiveness as well, is not being a people pleaser. So I
Okay.
made the assumption that being a people pleaser, going above and beyond for your customers, would be a positive trait. And I'm wired to be a people pleaser. And we can go deep into the childhood. There was no trauma, but childhood psychology behind that, right? And a lot of it comes down to this idea of covert contracts. And I mentioned this at the middle of the show with an interview I did with a guy called Robert Glover. So a covert contract is, you might be aware, just for the audience, is when you do something for someone else for an exchange of value, but you don't communicate what that exchange of value is. I'm
Yeah.
going to do all this legwork and you're going to close the deal with me. But you haven't communicated with them that you're going to do all this extra hustle on the back of them doing the deal. So then when they don't close with you, you get really pissed off, you get angry, you send snotty emails on the back of you promised this and they hadn't promised anything. And I did this all the time. I will work really hard in this way. I will chase this girl, but I will not communicate my intentions that I fancy it and we should go out. And I'll just run around like a headless chicken as a 16-year-old trying to whatever, just with terrible kind of social skills. And it goes from for dudes, it's the relationships with women or men or wherever it is younger, and then that transitions into kind of sales. So lots of salespeople work very hard, but don't communicate the exchange of value that they're after. And if you do communicate that exchange of value up front of, if I send this proposal tomorrow, will you book some time into your diary to run through it? If you don't do that, you're going to get the run around. They're going to keep giving you objections. They're never going to close the deal. When you are clear in that communication, they say, no, I'm not going to run through it tomorrow because I'm not that bothered. It's a cold call. I'm just trying to get rid of you. So then you know
Yeah.
where you stand. So not
Yeah.
being a people pleaser was something that I thought was counterintuitive, but is one of the highest correlations between that and high performance.
Because it kind of says to me that not being a people pleaser means I believe in the solution that I'm going to provide you, and I'm going to have what might be a challenging conversation, but if I don't have that, then I'm not serving you. So it's like having a, it's like, yeah,
it also separates you from the stereotype of the pesky salesperson who calls and calls and calls.
just
Couple quick
checking
comment.
in.
Yeah, just checking in. Perfect, absolutely perfect. I've got a deal at the end of the month. There is no deal. All this kind of stuff. Where they're like, I'll help you with this. I'll come and you go down all day. Great. I'll come and look after your dog for the weekend.
That's
Just
not right.
just create craziness on the, and people want to work with adults. They want to
Yeah.
work with experts. They want to work with consultants. Do you confidently share with me our value proposition is this? Does it make at this high level? Do you think it would make sense to work with us? If we got the pricing right, do you think this would be a good fit for your business? These kind of questions then transition you from pesky salesperson with commission breath, trying to get the deal because the boss is breathing down their neck and is just hounding them, into, oh, Darren might be able to help me with a few things. It probably makes sense to jump on a quick call with him. That's all we're trying to do. Does it make sense to do this? Is like the rhetoric
Yes.
over and over and over and over again. And
Yeah.
with you're prospecting, for example, all you're trying to do is to book the meeting, right message, right person, right time. If you get those three aligned, and you're trying to get the person to go, I'm busy. I know this is a sales call. I'm not doing my due diligence for this organization if I don't just spend 20 minutes with Darren to talk about, transformational training for mindset for leadership teams. I'm not doing my job if I just don't jump on a quick call with them. That's all it is. You're not trying to sell them anything. You're not trying to influence. You're not trying to manipulate them. You're not. I know this is kind of blowing up on LinkedIn at the moment as a terrible strategy, but people are doing it. You're not booking a meeting with a calendar invite into people's diaries proactively, and then they're like, "What? Who am I meeting with? What's this person?" And then you try and pitch them on the back of the meeting's been kind of arranged in the diary. You're not relying on any shenanigans. You're just simplifying your message to the point where the person goes, "Yeah, it kind of makes sense. Jump on a call with them."
Yeah. And then as a salesperson, how much do you think, well, the importance of not attaching yourself to the perfect outcome? That is, not attaching yourself to put yourself under pressure to have to close this particular deal.
If you've got enough pipeline, all those kind of pressures disappear.
Yeah.
And you get enough pipeline by having your bum in the seat and doing the work. I've got it here. You won't be able to see it because the background's blurred. But when I work people get this booklet, it's not secret.
Yeah.
You can email me if you want to copy it. Anyone listen to this? There's not loads. There's a handful of calculations and formulas and ways to understand the amount of pipeline, the value of the pipeline that you have from a salesperson perspective of, is this going to get me to the income that I want based on commission, bonuses, multipliers going over a certain percentage of revenue and that side of things. Less so from a leadership perspective where they're trying to hit a straight number. So I'm always coming
Yeah.
from the perspective of the salesperson, really, rather than leadership.
Sure.
But just spending an hour filling in that booklet is often enough to tell you, I need to focus on closing the deals and progressing the deals in the pipeline, or I need more pipeline. And at
Yeah.
that point, then it becomes a mathematical problem an
Mm.
analytical problem, as opposed to you've got your heart set on this or that and that. And obviously that comes in a little bit. I'm working on a big deal. We talk about offline, but I'm working on a big deal at the moment. A really interesting company. I got a meeting with them next week. What we do? No, Friday this week. I'm really looking forward to having a chat with them because I think I can offer a ton of value and it's a ton of money. It's a big chunk off my like goal for the year if this one comes in. I think we can help, and they're excited about it. So my heart is a little bit in the deal, but if it doesn't come in, I know that my pipeline, there's enough in my pipeline that it's almost irrelevant.
Yeah.
And that's what you should be trying to position yourself. If you're
Yeah.
finding yourself getting sucked into the emotions of a deal, that doesn't serve anyone really, other than a little bit of passion is contagious and can be useful. But if you're coming from it from the opposite perspective of desperation or you're panicking, then you just need to get your head down for 3 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever it is, and just build a load of new pipeline and prioritize that
Yeah.
over closing the
Yeah.
deals. And thinking medium term as opposed to such short term that you've only got a minimum amount of impact that you can actually have on the numbers.
That's it. And some of the traits we've spoken about today, such as optimism, and consistency around the habits, that will bear fruit because it's through the activity that you'll actually start to develop a thing called momentum, which is really powerful in sales.
Yeah.
So mate, I'm really conscious of time. We've been talking for nearly an hour. If there was one piece of advice to leave people either in a sales role right now or as a sales leader that we need to be conscious of in the back half of 2024 leading into 2025, that's going to help us become better, more effective value creators in our marketplace, is there one thing that you'll be leading with in terms of advice or guidance?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to parrot what you said earlier on, Darren, of first understand who you need to become to achieve the goals that you want to achieve, and then put process in place step by step. So read a book or get some coaching or whatever it is. Just hang around with high performers, people who are there where you want to get to, and just spending time with them. Most people plod through life and then get to 70 and have regrets because
Yeah.
then obviously there's lots of fit 70-year-olds. There's lots of unfit 70-year-olds. There are lots of people who are taken from us early, perhaps what we would like them to have been taken. Being proactive and thinking perhaps even bigger of them, thinking bigger than what you think is possible right now, and then moving towards that is absolutely the way to go about it. And this isn't some like the secret, like you sit and meditate on this and think about it, right? No, it's if you want to get into, if you're a salesperson, you want to get into leadership, then maybe you should read some books on leadership. Maybe you should
Yeah.
start communicating with the leadership that are currently in the organization that this is your aspiration. You set a time frame for it. 12 months from now, I want to be in a leadership role. And then your brain starts working, your subconscious starts working and helping you move towards that. If you've got a deadline and you're 2 months away from it, you're probably going to start looking for other jobs and other roles. Same for sales leadership into executives, whatever it is, retiring early. Then when you say I want to retire at 45, you start reverse engineering the numbers to get there, and you're more likely to take that big leap that's going to put you on the right pathway to achieving what you want to achieve.
Love it.
Understand where you want to get to and then become the person who's capable of achieving that goal.
Love it. What a way to finish. Thank you so much. Greatly appreciate being on the podcast. It would be remiss of me, though, to not ask you one last question. That is, for people who are listening to this, where is the best place other than salesman.com to get access to you and to connect with you, Will?
Everyone can email me if you've got any questions or anything like that, will@salesman.com. And then, salesman.com, there's 2 books on there completely free that you referred to earlier on, Darren, of Selling Made Simple and the sales code. Tons of content, everything you need to know to find and close more deals in the next 30 days, but also become the person that will help you become the person who's capable of implementing that process. There's a community on there. There's loads of stuff. Just head over to salesman.com, get signed up, completely for free. And hopefully I'll speak to you in there or over email.
Awesome. Mate, Absolute pleasure. Enjoy your day because you're at the beginning, and I'm at the back end. So thanks once again for being on the podcast. Greatly appreciate it.
Cheers. Appreciate you, Darren.
Thank you for listening to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast. I trust the information in this episode has been helpful in your journey towards becoming exceptional. And remember, please take the time to rate the show, subscribe to the show so other people can find it. But also, if I can help you, jump on my calendar, go to leadwithdarren.com, and let's have a conversation about how I can help you along your journey to being exceptional.